Chapter 880. She didn't even look for your World Chamber of Commerce to settle the score. So how could you expect her to look for Feng Jiru? Wei Chuanxiu stared at the big Ming Luan, the mustache on his lips trembling. He then raised his head to look at Yun Peng, who had left the building as soon as possible. He realized that Yun Peng was still the smart one, trying his best not to interact with the big Ming Luan. At this moment, a flying shuttle flying above the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce attracted everyone's attention. The flying shuttle slowly descended, and on it stood two golden-robed men and a petite beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu, who had been tormented to the point of losing his temper, was slightly startled. He couldn't help exchanging glances with Shui Mingqing and the others, because the woman standing on the flying shuttle was none other than Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. When Mu Tianjiao saw Yu Qianqiu, she smiled sweetly and nodded. Her gaze fell on the corpse on the ground, and she couldn't help but be stunned. When she saw that there were people wearing the clothes of the Immortal Palace present, she was even more baffled. After the three of them got off the flying shuttle, one of the golden-robed men whispered a few words to Mu Tianjiao, while the other quickly put away the flying shuttle. The three of them walked together to the Great Bright Wheel and saluted. "Greetings, Great Bright Wheel Bearer." De Mingluan nodded slightly and looked at Mu Tianjiao suspiciously. "This young lady looks unfamiliar. May I know who you are?" There were too many people in the Immortal Palace. He didn't even know who the two golden-robed men were, let alone Mu Tianjiao, because he had never seen her before. "This junior is Mu Tianjiao of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce." Mu Tianjiao bowed respectfully. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings immediately became restless. It turned out that this woman was the woman of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong. Those who didn't know her immediately memorized Mu Tianjiao's appearance, so that they wouldn't do anything stupid in the future. Hui Yunlong and Du Feng's expressions were somewhat bitter. "Oh!" De Mingluan immediately understood and said with a faint smile. "So it is Wu Xiong's wife. There is no need to say junior. Wu Xiong and I have a close relationship, and we are all on the same side. If you continue to call yourself junior, Wu Xiong will realize that he is a generation lower than you, and will not be happy." "Hehe, why are you here?" A complicated look flashed across Mu Tianjiao's eyes. She cupped her hands and said, "Yu Qianqiu and I are friends. I heard that the World Chamber of Commerce is opening, so I came to congratulate you." Hearing this, many people felt a chill in their hearts. They no longer dared to look down on Yu Qianqiu. This Yu Qianqiu had undoubtedly formed a relationship with Wu Xiong. De Mingluan was startled. After sizing up Yu Qianqiu, he smiled and said, "Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. When you have time, come visit the Chamber of Commerce Alliance." After greeting them, he glanced at Wei Chunxiu and left with his two subordinates. As soon as he left, the oppressive atmosphere immediately became relaxed. Yu Qianqiu winked at Hu Changxiu and Yu Nantian, and the two of them immediately went to deal with the bodies on the ground. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his hands at the people who came to congratulate him. "Thank you for your support. Please come in." The few of them looked at Mu Tianjiao, wanting her to leave first. Although her cultivation wasn't much, her current status was extraordinary. Mu Tianjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. She took out a gift box from her storage bracelet and offered it to him. "This is a small token of my appreciation. I wish Sect Master you luck in opening the Chamber of Commerce." "Hehe, I've spent a lot of money. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he received it with both hands. He inadvertently touched a few of Mu Tianjiao's fingers. He didn't feel anything, but Mu Tianjiao's hand trembled slightly. Just as Yu Qianqiu stuffed the gift box into his storage pouch, Wan Ling also came over with a gift box. She said with a smile, "Just a little something. Sect Master Yu, the World Chamber of Commerce's business is booming." Then Shui Mingqing, Hui Yunlong, and Du Feng also presented their congratulatory gifts. Yu Qianqiu smiled like a flower and thanked them profusely. "You're too polite. Please come in. Everyone, please come in." He waved his hand and impolitely stuffed the gifts into his storage pouch. Under his guidance, the people who came to congratulate him stepped into the building curiously. Wei Chuanqiu didn't leave. He stared at Feng Jiuru and warned her with a voice transmission, "You're lucky today. If you have the ability, you can hide in the hallucinatory immortal city for the rest of your life. If you dare to take one step out of the hallucinatory immortal city, I'll immediately cut off your head to use as a cushion." Feng Jiuru's expression was dark and gloomy as she gritted her teeth. She had lost a lot of face today, and had undoubtedly lost the face of the Heartless Palace. If the sect got wind of this, they would inevitably be out of luck. Not only that, Wei Chuanxiu just had to threaten to kill her. Since that was the case, no one would have an easy time. Feng Jiuru slowly put her hands behind her back. Her gaze swept across the 4 islands sect masters in the sky, and she calmly transmitted her voice to them. "Now it's your turn to make a move. Whoever kills Yu Qianqiu can obtain this territory. My Heartless Palace will also strongly support his development." Lan Hao and the other 3 looked at each other, with an indescribably bitter expression. Everyone had seen everything that had just happened. Even Feng Jiuru herself couldn't do anything to the World Chamber of Commerce. So what could they do? That's right. The rules of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance allowed a sect master to challenge another sect master. But if they really did such a thing, judging from Wei Bat King's temper, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Excluding this point, even Wu Xiong's wife had come to support Yu Qianqiu. Could they afford to offend such a person? What? Are you afraid? Or do you want to go back on your word? Feng Jiuru warned sternly. Either you didn't agree to me in the first place, or don't even think about going back on your word. Otherwise, don't even think about returning to the 4 islands of Lake Light. I'll send people to take good care of your families. This was a naked threat. The 4 of them were shocked when they heard this. Lan Hao replied angrily, "Elder Feng, aren't you going too far by doing this? Is this your personal intention, or the intention of the Heartless Palace?" Heartless Palace is the #1 sect in the immortal world. I've never heard of Heartless Palace using other people's families to threaten people. There aren't many reasons, Feng Jiuru indifferently said. If anyone can kill Yu Qianqiu while challenging him, not only can they obtain this mountain, I will also do my best to facilitate the unification of the 4 islands of Lake Light. From then on, there will only be one sect master in charge of the 4 islands of Lake Light. That's all I have to say. Do as you see fit. As soon as she finished speaking, Feng Jiuru suddenly looked into the sky. She saw figures landing one after another. Judging by their clothes, they were obviously disciples from various sections. She even knew many of them. They were all walking towards the entrance of the World Commerce Association. The 2 rows of people at the entrance with big red flowers on their chests hurriedly welcomed them. Feng Jiuru was so angry that she almost vomited blood. This was called a broken drum beating. Those sects who were watching at first saw that the World Commerce Association had stabilized the situation and immediately came to join in the fun. Every time they went to a sect, it was undoubtedly a slap to Feng Jiuru's face. Feng Jiuru angrily stared at the 4 sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Inside the lobby, there was a pool decorated with mountain spring water. There were fluorescent stones at the bottom of the pool, allowing people to clearly see the small fish swimming in it. There were crystal counters all around. All kinds of immortal herbs lay quietly inside. There were also fluorescent stones placed sporadically in the cabinets. It looked very beautiful. Yu Qianqiu used the layout of the exhibition hall from his previous life. He especially strengthened the lighting effect created by the fluorescent stones. Those who had never come in before would have their eyes light up when they saw it for the first time. This kind of environment was the most attractive to women. Wan Ling and Mu Tianjiao's eyes lit up when they walked in. They kept shaking their heads as they looked around. Every time they walked in front of a crystal cabinet, the 2 girls' attention wasn't on the immortal herbs inside. Instead, they were more focused on admiring the psychedelic colors reflected by the fluorescent stones and the crystal cabinet. The only fly in the ointment was that there had been some fighting in the lobby. Some places had already been damaged, but they had already been cleaned up. A few of the men who had come to support Yu Qianqiu saw the decorations inside, and their expressions became solemn. They could all see the value of this place, and it would definitely increase people's desire to buy it. Thus, They began to carefully observe every layout in the building. The desire to learn was in their eyes. You made the decorations here? Mu Tianjiao asked Yu Qianqiu, who was leading the way and introducing the place. Hehe. The entire World Commerce Chamber of Commerce worked together. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly as they walked. Mu Tianjiao didn't think that his subordinates would have such foresight. She smiled and said, I really couldn't tell. First there were waterfalls, then there were tall buildings, and now there are these attractive decorations. You really are extraordinary. Yu Qianqiu casually said a few polite words and laughed it off. However, it was precisely because of this conversation that Mu Tianjiao took a few more glances at his subordinates. She immediately discovered that many of them were acquaintances she had seen before. This discovery surprised Mu Tianjiao a little because she had seen some of them in the Divine Ruin realm. Weren't they people that Shui Miqing had gathered from various sects to help? How did they become Yu Qianqiu's subordinates? Shui Miqing, Hu Yunlong, and Du Feng didn't pay attention at first. As faces flashed past their eyes, they gradually recognized some people. The two of them looked at each other in dismay. Shui Miqing was a little nervous, afraid of being exposed. Fortunately, neither Wan Ling nor Master Yu knew these people. Yu Qianqiu had just led these people to the staircase and was about to take them to the second floor to continue their tour, when they suddenly heard a faint voice saying, "Welcome," from outside. Everyone stopped and looked over. They saw a large group of people walking in. After coming in, they began to look at the crystal cabinets. They didn't look like people who were going to cause trouble. Huo Lianqing laughed and said, "It seems that all the sects have sent people to support us. I reckon that Feng Jiuru's expression isn't good right now." Who knew that just as he finished speaking, a loud shout suddenly came from outside. "Yu Qianqiu, come out! Yu Qianqiu, come out!" It was shouted several times in a row. It seemed that several people were shouting at the same time, causing the lobby to reverberate continuously. Clearly, they were using their cultivation to make this sound. "Damn it! Who is wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves?" Yu Qianqiu muttered. The voice was very unfamiliar, so it should be someone he didn't know. He quickly rushed out of the lobby and saw 4 people standing in a row not far from the door, looking at him. The various feudal lords outside the door also indicated that it was them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but frown and ask, "Why did you call me out?" Chapter 881. Lan Hao, Su Yuchang, Bao Tuxing, and Ning Zixuan looked at each other with complicated expressions. In just a short while, a large group of people had already rushed out of the gate, especially the green-winged bat king Wei Chuanxiu, who was looking them up and down with an unfriendly gaze, making it difficult for them to speak. "You know them?" Wei Chuanxiu turned around and asked. When he saw Yu Qianqiu shake his head slightly to indicate that he did not know him, he immediately turned around and glared at him. "Where did this bastard come from? Why are you shouting here?" Feng Jiru, who was floating in the air, sneered. Lan Hao, who was below, took a deep breath and said, "The 4 of us are the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light. Unfortunately, we have taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Chamber of Commerce, so we have come to challenge the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianqiu." These words immediately caused a commotion. Those who knew them knew that they had always followed the lead of the Heartless Palace, so they quickly looked at Feng Jiru in the sky and understood what was going on. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, was startled. He did not expect that this troublesome matter would fall on him. Wei Chuanxiu checked the 4 cultivators and found that they were all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage. Thus he sneered and said, "You know that I am here, but you dare come here to cause trouble? I don't think you fellows have the guts to do so. Tell me honestly, who sent you fellows here?" Her words immediately reminded everyone, and they all turned to look at Feng Jiru in the air. Ning Zixuan cupped his fists and said, "I've long heard of Bat King Wei's great name. The 4 of us wouldn't dare to cause trouble. It's just that we've taken a fancy to the treasured land of the World Commerce Association. In addition, sect leader Yu's cultivation isn't high and our 4 sects are poor and can't afford to buy a mountain. So we have no choice but to challenge sect leader Yu." Her words were so direct that Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. Although he had guessed that Feng Jiru was behind this, It was obvious that she thought he was a pushover. Wei Chuanxiu was stunned when she heard that. She couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. The lords of the various countries had also heard about the sect master's challenge, and they looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Su Yuchong cupped his fists and said, "Sect leader Yu, I'm sorry. Please follow us to the Life and Death Mound." The so-called Life and Death Mound was the one and only place in the illusory immortal city where one could fight, and its purpose was for the various sect leaders to challenge each other. Back when the Merchant Alliance set up this place, many people felt puzzled. Why didn't they allow people to fight in the illusory immortal city, but allowed the sect masters of the various sects to challenge each other? Everyone's gazes gathered on Yu Qianqiu. Yufuzi and the others looked at each other helplessly. They hadn't expected to encounter such a thing, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. Because this was the rule of the illusory immortal city, no one was allowed to interfere in a battle between sect masters. Yu Qianqiu was speechless at such a blatant challenge, which was allowed by the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. He secretly sent a message to Wei Chuanxiu. How are their cultivation levels? Their cultivation bases are not high. They are all at the late-stage ascendant immortal stage. There was a hint of ridicule in Wei Chuanxiu's voice. Damn it. Of course it's not high for you. Yu Qianqiu coughed and waved his hand at Lan Hao and the rest. All right. Disperse. I refuse to accept your challenge. As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings went silent, and everyone revealed expressions of disbelief as they looked at him. This was the first time they'd heard of such a thing in Illusory City. This fellow really isn't afraid of losing face, because everyone in my sect is watching. Yu Qianqiu didn't feel any pressure at all. He continued to wave at everyone. Everyone, welcome to my World Merchant Association. Everyone do what you need to do. Today, my World Merchant Association will be selling immortal herbs. All immortal herbs will be sold at half price. Everyone is welcome to purchase them. The lords didn't feel any pressure. They straightened the big red flowers on their chests and waved at everyone. Please come in, please come in. Everyone looked at each other. They found that as long as one was willing to lose face, everything was easy to do. Trouble would be solved in an instant. They all moved their feet and rushed inside. Wei Chuanqiu stared at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. He found that this guy's nonchalant expression didn't seem to be fake. His skin was really thick. Lan Hao and the rest didn't expect things to end like this. After being dumbfounded, they all became wild with joy. This was Yu Qianqiu's own refusal to challenge them. They couldn't be blamed. The four of them immediately looked back at Feng Jiuru in the air, with a helpless expression. They were all prepared to leave. Unexpectedly, Feng Jiuru's expression was distorted. She mocked loudly in the air. A dignified leader of a sect is actually afraid of battle and death. I think your World Merchant Association should just close down, so that you don't embarrass yourself here. No matter how rational a person was, once they flew into a rage out of humiliation, they would always do unreasonable things. Feng Jiuru was like this. It seemed that if she didn't tear Yu Qianqiu into pieces, or torment him to the point that he was too ashamed to show his face, she wouldn't be able to vent the anger in her heart. Lan Hao and the rest's expressions changed greatly. Anyone could tell that Feng Jiuru was provoking Yu Qianqiu. In an instant, everyone stopped and looked at Yu Qianqiu. Facing the pressuring gazes from all directions, Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable all over. He coughed and asked Wan Gai, Elder Wan, you also know that I hate fighting and killing the most. Is it embarrassing for me to refuse someone else's challenge? The lords were deeply suspicious of Yu Qianqiu's words that he hated fighting and killing. However, they were all on the same side, so naturally no one would expose it. Wang Yi smiled awkwardly. It's really hard to say, but you're the first sect master in the history of the psychedelic immortal city to refuse a challenge. Hee. Don't worry, no one can force you to do something like this. Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding. He then waved at everyone and said, Everyone, please come in and do what you need to do. Don't pay attention to the mad dogs barking outside. Now that things had escalated to this point, the two sides would definitely fight to the death, if there was an opportunity. However, because everyone had scruples in the psychedelic immortal city, Yu Qianqiu didn't plan to give Feng Jiuru any face. Most importantly, even if he gave her face, she wouldn't appreciate it. She would only take a mile when given an inch. Yu Qianqiu never did this kind of thing. Everyone looked at Feng Jiuru in the sky with strange expressions. They knew that he had lost a lot of face today. Not only did he lose his own face, but he also lost the Heartless Palace's face. They were afraid that the Heartless Palace wouldn't let him have a good time when he returned. This was equivalent to messing things up. Yu Qianqiu. A fierce shout came from the sky. Feng Jiuru said aggressively. If you're afraid of death, just say it. If you don't dare to accept the challenge, then admit defeat in front of everyone. Don't think about bluffing your way through. Even if you hide today, I guarantee that there will be people coming to challenge you every day. If you have the ability, then hide for the rest of your life. Be a coward for the rest of your life. His voice shook the surroundings. He was clearly angry out of humiliation. The people from the various sects looked at him in surprise. They couldn't understand. The situation was very clear. The more he made a fuss like a shrew, the more face he would lose. Why did he have to do this? It was obvious that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't accept the challenge. Little B** starred. Looks like he's really eager to die. Wei Chuanqiu snorted coldly. His eyes were already filled with killing intent. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and said through gritted teeth, "That's right. He's eager to die." As soon as he said that, to everyone's surprise, Yu Qianqiu leaped into the sky in a flash. He pointed at Feng Jiuru and shouted angrily, "Old dog, you're really tired of living. Don't think that I don't know that you're the one who instigated the 4 islands of Lake Light. It's none of your business whether I accept the challenge or not. If you can't stand it, then go back to your Heartless Palace." What the hell? Why is the Heartless Palace full of scum? Scram. Don't embarrass yourself in my territory. The torturer was about to fly into a rage. The lords of the various countries exchanged glances. Everyone knew that this was how Yu Qianqiu behaved in the human world. Once he flew into a rage, there was nothing he wouldn't dare to do. Everyone couldn't hide the worry in their eyes. The difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great. In fact, Yu Qianqiu's safety was related to everyone's interests. The people of the various sects were speechless when they heard that. This Yu Qianqiu was indeed angered. He was already speaking without thinking. It was enough to target Feng Jiuru. Why did he have to drag the Heartless Palace into this? Once the Heartless Palace was angered, the consequences were not something that Yu Qianqiu or the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce could bear. Feng Jiuru's eyes were burning with excitement. She shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you insult my Heartless Palace? Don't give me that. You're already so old, yet you're still bringing out your backer. Even I feel ashamed for you. You're pestering me like a shrew." Yu Qianqiu slapped his chest and cursed. "My words are as hard as nails. I dare to say it, so I dare to accept it. I'm insulting your Heartless Palace. How can a place like you come from?" Pfft. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Yin Peng, who was silently observing the situation from the rooftop, stared at Yu Qianqiu with a sharp gleam in his eyes. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes also lit up. He stroked his mustache and muttered, "How dare you insult the Heartless Palace like this? Grandpa's cowardice wasn't in vain." Yafuzi, Wang Gai, and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. He was too impulsive. He was still too young. Mu Tianjiao's mouth was slightly agape. A man's courage was often the easiest thing to move a woman. Only Wan Ling had a matter-of-fact expression on her face. How could a trusted spy of an immortal emperor be afraid of the Heartless Palace? In truth, Yu Qianqiu was indeed enraged. However, he was not too impulsive. Feng Jiuru was simply going overboard with her pestering him time and time again. She had actually said that there would be people coming to challenge them every day. At this point, there was basically no room for reconciliation with the Heartless Palace. Instead, it was better to take things one step at a time. Since he was destined to have a conflict with the Heartless Palace, there was no point in enduring it anymore. He couldn't die a coward, right? Even if he died, he had to die with a bang. He couldn't let others look down on him. He was someone who cared about his reputation. Feng Jiuru wasn't angry. Instead, she laughed happily. Yu Qianqiu's words were enough. Even if Yu Qianqiu didn't accept the challenge today, It would give the Heartless Palace a chance to teach him a lesson. She chuckled. Don't pretend to be so daring. Someone who doesn't even dare to accept the sect master's challenge has no right to insult the Heartless Palace. He's just a coward who's afraid of death. Chapter 882. Well said. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and shouted. If that's the case, you old dog shouldn't be afraid of death like me, right? Everyone exchanged glances with the people around them. Even Feng Jiuru felt that there was a trap in his words, but she was angered by the continuous insults. Feng Jiuru's mouth twitched, and she carefully responded. At least, if I'm the leader of a sect, and I'm challenged by a sect leader in this city, there's no reason for me to be a coward. It seems that you're really not afraid of death. Very well, I hope you're really not afraid of death. After a cold snort, Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. Since you're not afraid of death, how about we make a bet? As long as you agree to this bet, I'll accept the challenge of the four of them at all costs. With that said, he waved his arm and pointed at Lan Hao and the others below. Countless pairs of eyes widened, and countless pairs of ears pricked up. Feng Jiuru's eyes flickered, and she hesitated, worried that it was a trap, but Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted. What? You don't dare? At this point, Feng Jiuru had to find a suitable reason to retreat, so she gritted her teeth and said, What bet? A domineering aura suddenly erupted from Yu Qianqiu's body. His tiger-like eyes widened as he scanned the crowd around him. He didn't even look at Feng Jiuru as he pointed a finger at her and said vehemently, I'll bet your worthless life. If I lose, you can have my head, and I won't regret it. If I win, I'll end your worthless life with my own hands. You're the one who started this, and you're the one who kept pestering me. Do you dare to bet your life with me? There was silence all around, and only his words echoed in the air. It was really domineering. No one expected that he, who had shamelessly refused the challenge before, would take the initiative to accept the challenge. And he even said that he would bet his life with Feng Jiuru. With such courage, who would dare to say that he was afraid of death? Now it was up to Feng Jiuru to accept the challenge. However, everyone believed that Feng Jiuru would not refuse. If she wanted to take Yu Qianqiu's life, this was the perfect opportunity. One had to know that Yu Qianqiu was only at the spirit-severing stage, while the Four Islands sect masters were at the late exalted immortal stage. If any one of them came out to challenge Yu Qianqiu, it would be hard for him to survive. Those who were concerned about Yu Qianqiu were all on tenterhooks. Mu Tianjiao's hands were clenched tightly. This was especially true for the feudal lords who had followed Yu Qianqiu to the celestial realm. They were both nervous and excited. They wanted to see the strongest torturer in the human world fight against an immortal from the celestial realm. But they were also afraid that something might happen to Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu died, they would never be able to return to the human world. Many of them still had family members in the human world. Why wouldn't I? Since you're courting death, don't blame me. Feng Jiuru kept sneering. He couldn't think of a reason to refuse. He didn't believe that a cultivator at the late stage of Supreme Immortal Realm couldn't defeat a cultivator at the Soul Formation Realm. They were on completely different levels. Besides, if he didn't dare to accept it, then what he said before would be no different from farting. If he didn't have the guts to accept it, then the Heartless Palace's face would be bitten by dogs. By then, the Heartless Palace would skin him alive. The surroundings immediately became lively. Everyone knew that there was going to be a good show. There were also many people who looked at Yu Qianqiu sympathetically. In the end, he was still forced into a dead end by Feng Jiuru. How could a small world chamber of commerce fight against the powerful Heartless Palace? They didn't even need to do anything. Four sect masters, Sect Master Yu has accepted the challenge. The next step is up to you. Feng Jiuru smiled at Lan Hao and the others. The four of them looked at each other and flashed into the sky. They waved their hands and said, Please. No hurry. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. Feng Jiuru raised her brows and said, Why? Do you want to go back on your word? Yu Qianqiu snorted and said, I'm afraid that someone will go back on his word, so I have to find a witness who can restrain both sides. Feng Jiuru looked down at Wei Chuanxiu and said mockingly, Indeed, we should find a witness to prevent someone from going back on their words, just because their cultivation is higher. Her meaning was obvious, and she was probably referring to Wei Chuanxiu. Wei Chuanxiu flashed into the sky and shouted at Feng Jiru. "Little bastard, who are you talking about?" Feng Jiru couldn't be bothered to touch his brows and kept silent. Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly, "I'm afraid only the Great Radiance Will Executor can make decisions in this illusory immortal city, and only the Great Radiance Will Executor can effectively supervise our bet. Bat King Wei, can you invite the Great Bright Will Keeper to be a witness?" As soon as these words came out, not to mention the others, even Feng Jiru was a little surprised. She looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. She didn't know where he got the confidence to ask the Great Bright Will Keeper to be a witness. It should be known that if he, Yu Qianqiu, lost, he wouldn't even have a chance to go back on his word. If the Great Bright Will Keeper agreed, it would definitely not let any of the losers escape. Similarly, Feng Jiru couldn't escape. Wei Chuanxiu was slightly surprised. In fact, Feng Jiru had guessed his thoughts. If Yu Qianqiu lost, he was confident that he could save Yu Qianqiu's life. But if the Great Bright Wheel Keeper was present, he couldn't save him at the critical moment. Boy, are you crazy? Are you really confident that you can deal with those 4 *T sect masters? Wei Chuanxiu secretly transmitted his voice. I can even deal with you. Are you afraid that I can't deal with them? Nonsense. If I hadn't been careless and let my inner core fall into your hands, killing you would be easier than killing an ant. Do you think that my purple fire can't deal with the 4 of them? I admit that the power of the purple fire is very terrifying. But the way to fight is to adapt to the situation. Sometimes, no matter how good an external object is, it can't decide the outcome. After all, your cultivation is too low. That if you insist, I won't stop you. Just return my inner core to me first. If something happens to you and I can't find my inner core, I'll be screwed by you. Damn. It seems that you don't have confidence in me, Yu Qianqiu said in a bad mood. Let me ask you, are you sure that the 4 of them are at the late exalted immortal stage and not great immortal stage? Wei Chuanxiu looked at Lan Hao and the other 3 suspiciously and replied, I have good eyesight. I'm sure that none of the 4 of them are above the late exalted immortal stage. From what you said, are you confident that you can deal with immortal cultivators below the great immortal stage? Don't worry so much. Just help me invite the Great Bright Wheel to be the supervisor. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided not to tell him the reason. He remembered that when he was attacked in the Granite Mountains last time, the hunchbacked old man said that only experts who had reached the great immortal stage could resist his Absorbing Star's great technique. Since the Absorbing Star's great technique could deal with these 4 guys, there was no need for him to reveal his other trump cards. The 2 of them looked at each other without saying a word. Anyone could see that they were secretly communicating with each other. The longer Feng Jiru waited, the more worried she became. She was afraid that she would be taken advantage of, so she shouted, Aren't you going to invite the Great Bright Wheel? What are you waiting for? If you want to go back on your word, just say it. Wei Chuanqiu stared at him and said, Little bastard, you will cry. Just you wait. Then she turned into a stream of light and flew toward the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. Feng Jiru gave Lan Hao and the others a look. The 4 of them cupped their hands at Yu Qianqiu and said, See you at the life and death mound. They flew away first. Feng Jiru sneered at Yu Qianqiu and flew after them. The surrounding people were in an uproar, and they all flew toward the life and death mound. Yu Qianqiu looked back at the pairs of eyes below and said indifferently, Don't join in the fun. Look after the house. These clowns are not worth mentioning. I will go back after I deal with them. The lords immediately cupped their hands and said, Goodbye, sect master. When Long Xiaojiu saw Wan Ling's provocative greeting, she immediately gritted her teeth in anger. Her face was deathly pale, and her delicate body trembled. The hatred of having her husband stolen surged into her heart. She wanted nothing more than to devour her flesh and bones. Chapter 883. After all, Wan Ling and the others were standing not far from them. In addition, they came together with the attention-grabbing Yu Qianqiu and the others. The people of the Hidden Dragon Manor naturally saw Wan Ling and subconsciously noticed Long Xiaojie's abnormal behavior. In the entire Hidden Dragon Manor, Guang Nianzu was the only one who did not dislike Wan Ling. If it was not for Wan Ling stealing his love, Long Xiaojie would have been married a long time ago. She would not have had the chance to marry him. Jiu Er, don't lose your composure, and let others laugh at you. Duke Long Yu frowned, and transmitted his voice. Guang Juanru sighed softly, and turned her head to look elsewhere. Out of sight, out of mind, Long Xiaojie tried her best to control her emotions. She no longer looked at Wan Ling, who was grinning and showing off her strength. Her gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with Feng Jiuru. She bit her lips and no one knew what she was thinking. Just as everyone was waiting patiently, someone suddenly shouted, "They're here!" Everyone looked in the same direction and saw a green flowing light and a golden flowing light shooting over at an unbelievable speed. In the blink of an eye, they flew over everyone's heads. They had no intention of stopping at the life and death mound and went far away in an instant. Everyone looked at each other. Many of them could tell that the two flowing lights were Wei Chuanxiu and the Great Bright Luan. However, what was strange was that the Great Bright Luan seemed to be chasing after Wei Chuanxiu. In terms of speed, it seemed that Wei Chuanxiu was slightly faster than the Great Bright Luan. "Wei Chuanxiu, stop right there." The Great Bright Luan's angry roar came faintly from afar. What happened? While everyone was confused and shocked, they saw a green and golden flowing light make a turn in the distant sky and fly back here. It was also at this moment that white crescent moons suddenly burst out from the golden light chasing after it. They circled around and strangled the green light with a thunderous momentum. More than a dozen moons drew strange arcs in the air as they chased after the green light that was rapidly escaping. "Great Bright Luan, you actually played for real." Wei Chuanxiu's exasperated voice came from the sky. The two of them flew to the sky above the life and death mound once again. The green light that Wei Chuanxiu had transformed into did not seem to want to escape anymore. In an instant, the green flowing light flashed with a dazzling speed and created countless flowing light mirages. It shuttled back and forth and dodged the dozens of thunderous moon wheels. That miraculous speed of dodging caused everyone to gasp, and all of them sighed in their hearts. As expected of the Azure Wing Bat King, that was skilled in speed in the immortal dimension. If it was any other person, that person would have probably perished beneath the lunar wheel that possessed shocking might. After a series of twists and turns, the dodging green light in the air found a gap and quickly teleported away. By the time everyone found Wei Chuanxiu, she was already hiding behind Mu Tianjiao, her clothes in a mess. She was wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. "Wu Xiong's wife, on account that Yu Qianqiu is your friend, quickly tell this madman to stop." Mu Tianjiao looked at him speechlessly. She also knew her own limits. How could she have the qualifications to order around the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's Great Bright Wheel? She really could not ask for this favor. In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so powerful full moon discs came crashing down with a thunderous momentum, scaring the people down below. Just as they were about to flee, the full moon discs suddenly stopped and quickly bounced back into the sky. However, the powerful pressure that came with it just now still forced many people to stagger. The rocks under their feet were sent flying everywhere. Even after he stopped, the momentum was still astonishing. With a flash of golden light, the Great Bright Wheel appeared in the sky. It converged into dozens of white lunar wheels and drilled into his arms. The Great Bright Wheel glared at Wei Chuanxiu below with murderous eyes. If it was not for Mu Tianjiao, it would not care how many people were standing below, and whether it would hurt the innocent. It would have already killed them all in one fell swoop. Wu Xiong's wife still has a lot of face. Wei Chuanxiu cupped his hands towards Mu Tianjiao to express his gratitude. He then laughed at the Great Bright Wheel in the sky. "Great Bright Wheel, I knew you would give Wu Xiong face and not lay a hand on his woman. You bastard, so many years have passed and you're still so useless. What kind of ability is it to rely on a woman to protect your life?" The Great Bright Wheel pointed at him and shouted angrily, "If you have the ability, come out and see if I don't skin you alive, you bat." Everyone could see that Wei Chuanxiu was definitely up to no good, and had angered the Great Bright Wheel. Otherwise, the great bright wheel would not have personally chased after him. From their words, it could be heard that the two of them had known each other for many years. Previously, when Wei Chuanxiu was able to invite the great bright wheel to the Chamber of Commerce, many people had this guess. However, they were still fine last time. How did they fall out this time? Some of the elders in the immortal world might know that Wei Chuanxiu, Yin Peng, and the great bright wheel were inseparable friends. Later, the three of them were noticed by the immortal palace and wanted to recruit them into the immortal palace. It was also because of this that the three of them had a disagreement and parted on bad terms. In the end, the great bright wheel joined the immortal palace while Wei Chuanxiu and Yin Peng continued to roam freely in the immortal world, not wanting to be bound by others. What everyone did not know was that Wei Chuanxiu was able to invite the great bright wheel to the Chamber of Commerce because of their past relationship. Otherwise, how could a normal person invite the powerful great bright wheel? However, what made the great bright wheel unhappy was that not long after he returned to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, Wei Chuanxiu came to ask him to be some bullshit witness, which he immediately rejected. Wei Chuanxiu begged a few times to no avail, and was a little angry. He could not help but kick the great bright wheels, which made the great bright wheel fly into a rage, and the two of them immediately fought. This fight almost caused the experts of the entire Chamber of Commerce Alliance to surround and attack Wei Chuanxiu. Fortunately, the great bright wheel remembered their past relationship and did not let others interfere. After they started fighting, Wei Chuanxiu could not help but be convinced that, just like before, he was still no match for the great bright wheel. He could only take a beating, and had no choice but to escape. Due to his talent, although Wei Chuanxiu was no match for the great bright wheel, he was faster, which led to the scene everyone saw. What are you arguing about? Do you think I like to see your stinky face? Wei Chuanxiu pointed at Mu Tianjiao indignantly and said, if it wasn't for Wu Xiong's friend asking me to invite you, who the hell would go find you? When he said this, Mu Tianjiao stared at Wei Chuanxiu dumbfounded, as if asking what did this have to do with her. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched, and he touched his forehead weakly. He had to admit that this old bat was even more shameless than him. Everyone looked at Wei Chuanxiu speechlessly, and could not help but admire this guy. Only he dared to talk to the Great Bright Wheel's owner like this. The Great Bright Wheel was startled when he heard this. He looked at Mu Tianjiao, and immediately reacted. He was almost confused by Wei Chuanxiu's words. It was so complicated, but it had nothing to do with Mu Tianjiao at all. It was nothing more than Yu Qianqiu asking him to invite him. Shameless guy. Get out here. The Great Bright Wheel roared angrily. Wei Chuanqiu laughed, and could not be bothered with him. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, I have already invited the person for you. As for whether he agrees or not, it is not something I can control. You guys do as you see fit. After saying this, he tidied up his messy hair and clothes. Damn it. What an old scoundrel. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. But now was not the time to argue with the old bat. He immediately turned to Feng Jiuru and sneered. The Great Bright Wheel's owner has come as you wish. If you have something to say it quickly. She doesn't have time to wait for you. He deeply understood that he was not that big. It was better to leave such a big vat to the senior. Everyone in the surroundings almost fainted upon hearing this, and all of them looked at Feng Jiuru sympathetically. She was really unlucky to have run into these two shameless people, one big and one small. Mu Tianjiao looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Wan Ling was also speechless. How could the Emperor Immortal's trusted spy be like this? Wei Chuanqiu winked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile, as if he was praising his adaptability. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu wanted to kick him to vent his anger. He wanted to kick this incompetent guy to death. Feng Jiuru, who hadn't expected to be blamed on her, was stunned. Then, her expression changed drastically as she looked at the Great Bright Wheel. She waved her hand and said, It has nothing to do with me. It was Yu Qianqiu who came up with the idea to invite you here. Bullshit. Yu Qianqiu scolded. How dare you say that you didn't give permission? Under the watchful eyes of so many people, you still dare to lie through your teeth? Damn it. Is your heartless palace shameless? Feng Jiuru was a little panicked. Thinking that she had given permission, she did not know how to defend herself. She was so anxious that her forehead was covered with sweat. Enough! As the owner of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, the Great Bright Wheel was not someone who could be easily fooled. He stared at Yu Qianqiu coldly and shouted, "Ever since you came to the psychedelic immortal city, you have been playing all kinds of tricks. There has been no peace in the psychedelic immortal city. Don't put labels on others. Do you think I'm easy to fool?" Everyone looked at each other and realized that the owner of the Great Bright Wheel was indeed not easy to fool. Hearing this, Feng Jiuru's heart finally relaxed, and the eyes she looked at Yu Qianqiu became even more resentful. "Owner, you've wrongly accused me." Yu Qianqiu looked as if he had suffered a great injustice, but before he could defend himself, he heard Deming Luan shout, "Shut up." Then he looked at Wei Chuanxiu and said, "Didn't you want me to be the supervisor? Fine, I'll be the owner. It's good that this kid dies early, so you don't have to come out and embarrass yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, he landed beside Wei Chuanxiu in a flash, giving Wei Chuanxiu a fright. In the end, he saw that Deming Luan was not moving at all, and did not seem to have any intention of making a move. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief and mumbled, "Take off your pants to fart, what an unnecessary move." Deming Luan quickly swept a glance at him, then looked around and shouted decisively, "Begin!" The people at the side subconsciously moved a few steps away from the Great Bright Wheel. The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face turned cold. He tilted his head to look at Feng Jiuru and the others. He then flew directly to the center of the rocky hill. Chapter 884. This barren rocky hill was jokingly called the sect leader's graveyard. Who knew how many sect leaders had lost their lives here? The past had become history, and the fallen could not be resurrected. Only the luxuriant weeds stubbornly took root here, giving this place some life. Very few sect leaders would come to this ominous place. But after many years, the story of this place was about to repeat itself. Yu Qianqiu stood quietly on a relatively flat rock, staring calmly at Feng Jiuru and the others. Suddenly, the wind became stronger, and the weeds between the rocks began to sway. They seemed to have sensed something, and the withered weeds flew into the air, and no one knew where they would land. Under Feng Jiuru's secret, almost frantic urging, Lan Hao and the others had no other choice. But before they came, the estrangement caused by the fight for sect leader had been resolved. They knew that even if they won, the experts of the World Commerce Association would not let them return safely to the 4 islands of Lake Light. But they had no choice. Feng Jiuru would not let them return safely either. Furthermore, she had threatened them with their families. Thus they made an agreement among themselves. If any of the 4 of them were lucky enough to return, they would take the tokens of the sect masters of the 4 islands and restore the 4 islands to a single sect. At the same time, they would also entrust their families to them. Although the World Commerce Association allowed the sect leaders to challenge each other here, they did not allow a group fight. In other words, each challenge could only be one-on-one. Bao Tuxing flashed out from among the 4. He floated in the air and looked down. Yu Qianqiu also looked up, and their gazes met. The former's gaze was indifferent. He clearly did not think it would be difficult to defeat Yu Qianqiu. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. In fact, Yu Qianqiu knew that as long as he was vigilant, he could escape at any time, and no one could catch him. But he also knew what today's battle meant. This was a hurdle for the World Commerce Association. If he escaped, it would be equivalent to losing, and the territory he had painstakingly built would be handed over to someone else. This was something he would never allow. So he would never run away from today's battle, unless it was absolutely necessary. Since he accepted the challenge, he had to win. There were more than 300 pairs of eyes watching him from behind. As the #1 expert in the world, he could not disappoint them. At the same time, he recalled the scene when he parted ways with Bai Changchun in front of the gate to the underworld. He had promised Bai Changchun that he would not let him down. Yu Qianqiu's clothes were fluttering in the wind. Suddenly, Du Karen's voice resounded in his ears. "Yu Qianqiu, be careful. The people of the 4 islands of Lake Light are proficient in the art of controlling water. although I've never met them before. I'm sure they must have some tricks up their sleeves. Water manipulation technique? Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that his chances of winning had increased by a few notches. He shouted towards the sky, "Come!" Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes immediately focused on it without blinking. She seemed a little nervous. De Mingluan tilted his head slightly to look at him. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with confusion. When Bao Tuxing saw that Yu Qianqiu did not have anything in his hands and was fighting him with his bare fists, his hand that was reaching for his storage bracelet stopped. He said indifferently, "The difference between our cultivations is too big. I'll let you make the first move." His words sounded as if he wanted Yu Qianqiu to accept his defeat wholeheartedly. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He did not say anything else. He knew that he could not be careless when fighting with such an opponent. If he was hit by the opponent, he could lose his life. He estimated the distance between them. It was a few hundred meters. With his current cultivation, he could only lock onto an opponent within 50 meters. Even if the opponent broke into his range, if the opponent was too vigilant and dodged too quickly, he would not be able to lock onto the opponent in time. In that case, he would not be able to find a chance to use the absorbing star's great technique. The difference between their cultivations was too big. Sneak attack was still the best way. Yu Qianqiu gradually clenched his fists. His perception surged into the ground from under his feet like a tide, and quickly spread to the surroundings. With his current cultivation, he was still unable to use his perception in the air. He needed a medium to transmit his perception. However, the vast ground was his best medium. Everyone could tell from the minute changes in Yu Qianqiu's body that he was about to make a move. As he slowly spread his arms, everyone felt as if the ground was trembling along with his arms. When everyone clearly saw that the rocks on the rocky hill were shaking, they were immediately shocked. This scene was too shocking. Anyone who saw a large area of rocks vibrating would be shocked. How could this be? Everyone was in disbelief. It was as if Yu Qianqiu's movement and frown had already affected the entire rocky hill. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation had already reached such a high level? This was not something a soul formation stage cultivator could do. Could it be that he was deliberately hiding his cultivation? No wonder he dared to challenge the Heartless Palace. Wei Chuanqiu was stunned. Then he excitedly rubbed his hands. This guy really had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. The great bright wheel was still calm. However, his attention was completely focused on Yu Qianqiu. Over 100 streaks of green light quickly caught up to the fleeing corpse. With a burst of green light, it was turned into a hornet's nest in an instant. With a crisp dang sound in the air, a storage bracelet was bounced by a green stream of light. Yu Qianqiu, who had one hand behind his back and one hand in the air, happened to grab it. Without even looking at it, he directly put it away. Almost at the same time, the hundreds of cyan streams of light returned to where they came from. With a series of pung-pung sounds, they surrounded Yu Qianqiu and shot into the ground, disappearing without a trace, leaving only smoke and dust floating in the air. Yu Qianqiu placed his hands behind his back and watched the corpse in the air fall to the ground indifferently. The stone flying swords that were still circling in the air adjusted their direction, and with a schwa-schwa sound, thousands of gray shadows shot down, and in the blink of an eye, all of them stabbed into the surroundings of Yu Qianqiu. The surging smoke gradually drifted away, and Yu Qianqiu's figure appeared in everyone's line of sight again. From beginning to end, Yu Qianqiu stood on the stone and didn't move at all. Among the tens of thousands of stone swords, he looked back, stared at Feng Jiuru, and said indifferently, "Next." The unshakable momentum of the wind and clouds was not weaker than that of a grandmaster of a generation. Feng Jiuru was inexplicably frightened by his gaze, and everyone was stunned. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu's methods would be so terrifying. Although the momentum of the tens of thousands of swords was terrifying, it was still not comparable to the palm that could directly turn Bao Tuxing into a dried corpse. If that palm was aimed at them, everyone shuddered at the thought of it. It was too terrifying. After Master Ye's generation recovered from the shock, they all looked at Shui Mingqing's generation with questioning eyes. Shui Mingqing and the others nodded slightly, indicating that this was the star-absorbing great technique that Yu Qianqiu had used to kill the disciples of Heartless Palace in the ruins of God. However, when a few elders secretly asked a few juniors about the 10,000 swords, they all expressed that they didn't know. This was the first time they had seen Yu Qianqiu use it. Although Wei Chuanxiu had been with Yu Qianqiu for a long time, it was the first time she had seen Yu Qianqiu use such a terrifying star-absorbing great technique. When she thought about how this guy had so many powerful killing moves hidden on him, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. Wei Chuanxiu, what is going on between you and this Yu Qianqiu? The Great Bright Will calmly asked. What do you mean what is going on? Wei Chuanxiu came back to his senses and asked in confusion. The Great Bright Will slowly turned his head to look at him, and with a cold gaze, he said word by word, "Don't play dumb with me. Didn't you remember anything from Yu Qianqiu's 10,000 swords? It seems that I need to remind you. Myriad Swords Demon Monarch." Chapter 885. Wei Chuanxiu was startled, and immediately thought of the demon monarch, who terrorized both the immortal and netherworld. At that time, his cultivation was still shallow, and he did not have the qualifications to intervene in the war. However, he had witnessed the scene of the battle, and he still felt a lingering fear when he thought of it. Looking at Yu Qianqiu standing in the midst of the swords and smiling coldly, the scene of the swords just now did indeed give people a sense of déjà vu. This scene seemed to have been seen by the demon monarch who rode on the divine dragon. This matter can be big or small. You better explain it clearly, or else it will not benefit either of us, especially you and Yun Peng. De Mingluan warned him. Wei Chuanxiu looked at him and replied sarcastically, "What do you mean by big or small? You can't be suspecting that Yu Qianqiu is related to the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, right? Didn't the demon monarch of 10,000 swords already die in the hands of Jin Tai? What nonsense are you thinking about? I cannot think too much, but can you guarantee that the immortal emperor will not think too much?" De Mingluan snorted and said, "The demon monarch of 10,000 swords is the only one who can threaten him after the seal of the demon realm. Today, the scene of Yu Qianqiu controlling the swords will reach his ears sooner or later. As the person involved and the person in charge of this place, he will call me for questioning sooner or later. If I can't give him an explanation that will make him feel at ease, you and Yun Peng should prepare to be buried with Yu Qianqiu. I'm afraid I will not be able to absolve myself from the blame." Wei Chuanxiu fell into a short silence. He knew that what De Mingluan said was the truth. Jin Tai was a ruthless and arrogant person, and would definitely not allow anyone who could threaten his rule to exist. If he did not have a reason to feel at ease, it would indeed be a big problem. He paused and said, "I also can't explain this matter clearly. Let's ask him after this matter is over." At this moment, the remaining 3 people from the 4 islands of Lake Light suddenly quarreled, and immediately stopped the conversation between the two. This attracted everyone's attention. Everyone thought that they were afraid of death, and pushing the blame to each other. When everyone heard the content of their conversation, they all sighed with emotion. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. "If you still recognize me as your eldest senior brother, then listen to me." Following Lan Hao's angry shout, Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan lowered their heads in grief and indignation. Lan Hao extended his hand and pulled over the items that the two of them were holding. One was a silvery raincoat with a bamboo hat, and the other was a fishing net. Those who didn't know would think that they were fishing tools used by fishermen, but in fact, they were 2 of the 4 treasures of the 4 islands of Lake Light. The 4 disciples each took one of the 4 treasures: a gourd, a straw cape, a fishing net, and a fishing rod. The fishing rod was in Bao Tuxing's hands, but because he had underestimated his opponent, he was killed before he could take out his treasures. The storage bracelet with the treasures also fell into Yu Qianqiu's hands. Eldest senior brother, Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan suddenly shouted at the same time. Their voices were a bit low. After looking at each other, the 2 of them took the 2 items from Lan Hao's hands. Su Yuchang shook open the straw cape and personally put it on Lan Hao. Ning Zixuan used a special method to wrap the fishing net around Lan Hao's arm. "I think Master will be very happy to see us like this," Lan Hao laughed heartily. Then he also took out a large gray gourd from his storage bracelet and tied it to his waist. This meant that he had 3 of the 4 treasures on him. The reason why they made such a grand scene was because the way Yu Qianqiu killed Bao Tuxing was too shocking. Bao Tuxing didn't even have a chance to resist before the outcome was decided. At this moment, in the eyes of the 3 disciples, Yu Qianqiu was definitely an expert who had hidden his cultivation. Otherwise, how could a soul formation stage cultivator be so powerful? In fact, they weren't the only ones who thought this way. Many of the onlookers thought the same, because no one could see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. When the rabbit dies, the fox grieves, and the disciples let go of their previous enmity. So they all took out their treasures and focused them on one person. They felt that this was the only way they could defeat Yu Qianqiu. Su Yuchang and Ning Zixuan's eyes were filled with grief and helplessness as they watched Lan Hao fly over the life and death mound. In fact, the one who was the most worried and afraid was Feng Jiru. She never thought that Yu Qianqiu would be so powerful that he could kill Bao Tuxing so easily. If all the sect masters of the 4 islands of Lake Light were defeated, then she would be in trouble. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but sneak a glance at the Great Bright Wheel, who was supervising the battle. Coincidentally, the Great Bright Wheel's cold gaze swept over, causing her to immediately turn around in a panic. Seeing Lan Hao in such a strange outfit, Yu Qianqiu immediately raised his guard. He didn't even need to think about it to know that Lan Hao was definitely wearing treasures. Otherwise, the disciples wouldn't have to dress so solemnly. "Junior brother, I'll take revenge for you," Lan Hao roared. He grabbed the big gourd at his waist with one arm and pulled out the stopper of the big gourd with the other. Then he slapped the gourd, and a column of water shot out from the mouth of the gourd. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed. When the column of water came out of the gourd, it was only a thin stream of water. Who knew that it would suddenly become bigger after a short distance? The water waves were like a torrential river that poured down from the sky with a rumbling sound. What made Yu Qianqiu feel strange was that the torrential waves released from the gourd did not come for him. Instead, they were like a huge water dragon that wriggled in all directions. "Yu Qianqiu, this is the water gourd of the 4 treasures of Lake Light. He's setting up the heavenly water formation. You can kill him while he's setting up the formation." Huo Lianqing of the mythical fire palace was also secretly playing the good guy. Hearing him say it so easily, as if killing a late-stage ascendant immortal cultivator was really as easy as cutting vegetables, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. He was the clearest about his own strength. As long as he left the ground, he would immediately fall into a passive situation. The attack speed that he could display with his cultivation was simply not enough to catch the opponent's eyes. Even if he used his purple flames and divine sword, he probably wouldn't even be able to touch the opponent, let alone kill him. Sneak attacks when the opponent was unprepared was the way to go. Most importantly, being in the air meant that the attack range was wider, while being on the ground meant that there was more room for maneuver. At the very least, he could escape underground. He calmly watched the opponent set up the formation. In the eyes of others, they thought that he had a card up his sleeve. Who knew that he was doing this because he had no other choice? In a short while, the water dragon had entrenched itself into a huge water cube that occupied an extremely large area. The strange thing was that it did not collapse. The area within a radius of several miles had already become a vast body of water. The rocky hills were completely submerged. The onlookers had already risen into the air to watch. Everyone could vaguely see that Yu Qianqiu was still standing motionlessly at the bottom of the water. At this moment, the water gourd in Lan Hao's hand had also stopped pouring water down. Just a slight movement of the gourd would cause the waves below to surge. Clearly, it could draw in the water cube below. A cold smile appeared on Lan Hao's face. Since the opponent was so arrogant, it was obvious that he did not know the power of his water sky formation. Then, as if he was hugging a waste drum, he used his other hand to continuously slap the body of the gourd. 2 huge waves immediately surged up from the surging waves below, condensing into 2 huge fists. They opened their palms and aimed at Yu Qianqiu at the bottom of the water. With a loud bang, they broke through the waves and grabbed at him. At first, Yu Qianqiu was a little worried. However, after staying in the water for a while, he discovered that it was only SOO. Although this part of the water seemed to be controlled by something, it seemed that his control over the water art was stronger. When he discovered that the opponent was actually controlling the water to deal with him, he was immediately speechless. He was really displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. He actually dared to play with water in front of me. Then let's play. The undercurrent carried a huge pressure as it approached. He could clearly see the two huge dark blue hands grabbing at him. Yu Qianqiu waved his large sleeves. The two huge hands instantly collapsed and disappeared, merging into the water. The water gourd in his hand trembled, and instantly lost contact with the two huge hands. Lan Hao was immediately shocked. In this heavenly water formation, the gourd in his hand was the master of this part of the water. The two huge hands that were condensed were not afraid of being damaged at all. This was because this part of the water could repair them at any time, and then continue to attack the opponent. As long as the opponent's cultivation was not ridiculously high, being trapped in the formation was equivalent to being trapped in an endless entanglement. However, the opponent just waved his hand casually, and immediately, and silently broke his spell. This was a little too inconceivable. Could it be that his cultivation had reached an unimaginably terrifying level? Everyone who witnessed the battle looked at each other in dismay. Although most of them didn't know much about the power of the heavenly water array, they could tell from Lan Hao's shocked expression that something must have happened that shocked him. Everyone could also see some clues from the sudden change in Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang's expressions. Lan Hao loosened his grip on the gourd and hung it back on his waist. He understood in his heart that since the opponent had dealt with it so easily, it would be useless to use water again. His figure flashed, and like a meteor, he drilled into the water below with a bang. The straw cape on his body flashed with a white light, and his entire person disappeared on the spot. This time, it was immediately Yu Qianqiu's turn to be nervous. He quickly looked around, but he could not see the opponent's figure at all. This was a little too terrifying. His perception immediately surged out like a tide and spread out. This part of the water immediately became a part of his body. F*ck. He could actually become invisible. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He instantly discovered the opponent's position, but he could not see him at all. What shocked him the most was that when his perception swept over the other party's body, it felt as if there was nothing there, as if the other party didn't exist at all. If it wasn't for the fact that he had complete control over this region of water, he wouldn't be able to hide anything from him. He would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the straw cape on the opponent's body. There must be something strange about this straw cape. After Lan Hao drilled into the water, he immediately held his breath and stealthily hid for a while. Although he was very confident in the treasured clothes on his body, he now treated Yu Qianqiu as a real expert. He did not dare to relax at all. After waiting for a while, he carefully and slowly approached. He did not dare to cause any changes in the water. He was prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Yu Qianqiu was immediately speechless. He did not expect that there would be such a shameless person. He actually dared to play a sneak attack on him in the water. He simply continued to pretend to look around blankly. More than 10 purple flame flying swords quietly burrowed into the ground under his feet. He was also prepared to hit the opponent in one strike. Chapter 886. Both of them were prepared for a sneak attack. One was sneaky, while the other pretended not to know. They got closer and closer to each other. Lan Hao had a water splitter in his hand, which he hid under his straw cape. Because of the ripples in the water, everyone could not see clearly, but they could vaguely see Yu Qianqiu looking around blankly. Most people did not know what was going on behind the temporary calm. Only Ning Zixuan and Su Youchang knew the danger. They knew that their eldest senior brother was using his straw cape to hide himself, and was definitely approaching quietly to prepare a sneak attack. Their hearts were in their throats, hoping that their eldest senior brother would succeed in one strike. When the distance between the two of them was less than 200 meters, Yu Qianqiu could already feel Lan Hao slowly taking out his weapon. It was obvious that he was ready to attack. He could not help but curse in his heart. He wanted to wait for his opponent to get closer and see if he could use the absorbing star's great skill in the water. That way, his chances of winning would be higher. Lan Hao was worried that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too high, so he did not dare to get too close. He quietly stopped and was about to make a sneak attack when he suddenly heard a piu-piu sound coming from below. Before he had time to check, the water curtain in front of him had already flashed with purple light. At the same time, Lan Hao saw a trace of an evil smile hanging on the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth. He was immediately shocked. His reaction was considered fast, and he immediately guessed that he had fallen into a trap. He did not care about anything else, and desperately used teleportation to escape. A dark red halo of blood spread in the water, and a hua sound rose from the surface of the water. A white light flashed, and Lan Hao appeared, quickly catapulting into the air. He held the water splitter in one hand, and with the other hand, he took out a pill and crushed it. He applied it to the wound on his thigh, and immediately stopped the blood flow. The onlookers did not see clearly what had happened. They only saw a flash of purple light under the water, and Lan Hao immediately ran for his life, and was injured. Yu Qianqiu had already kept the purple flame flying sword. He had always insisted on not exposing this thing as much as possible. It would be troublesome if someone recognized it as the purple flame. This sneak attack made Yu Qianqiu feel that it was a pity. He didn't expect that the other party would still be able to escape. Although the other party had kicked him in the leg, for an immortal cultivator, it probably wasn't a big deal. The key thing was that the other party didn't hurt his vital parts. However, this also made Yu Qianqiu realize that his judgment was correct. Based on the opponent's cultivation and reaction speed, it would be difficult for him to hurt him. If he had followed up with a purple flame berserk explosion after injuring his opponent, he should have been able to finish him off. However, if he had done that, the chances of his purple flames being recognized would have greatly increased. This was a risk that was not easy to take. At that moment, Lan Hao, who was floating in the air, had a look of bewilderment on his face. He did not expect to be discovered by the other party, even though he was wearing the invisibility cloak. This undoubtedly proved that the other party's cultivation base was very high. But the strange thing was that the speed of the purple flying swords that attacked him just now was a bit slow. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to react at such a close distance. How could the speed of the flying swords with such high cultivation be so slow? Could it be that the other party intended to let him go? That was not possible. Since he couldn't figure it out, he simply didn't want to think about it. At this point he already had no way out. Even if he didn't want to fight, he had to fight. Lan Hao's left arm shook, and the fishing net that was wrapped around his arm burst out with a multicolored light. Like thousands of strands, it expanded and stretched infinitely. With a schwa sound, it scattered into the water below. Yu Qianqiu almost didn't have time to react. He found himself surrounded by a rapidly pouncing net that was rapidly shrinking towards him. Without saying anything further, he directly burrowed into the ground and emerged from the periphery of the net that was surrounding him. Looking back, he saw that the large rock that he had just landed on had been shredded into pieces by the dense, silk-like fishing net. Yu Qianqiu was shocked on the spot. He didn't know what this thin net was made of. It was actually so sharp that it could cut through rocks like tofu. If he had been careless just now, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Lan Hao, who was in the air, could see the situation underwater more clearly than anyone else. Furthermore, this area of water was connected to the treasured gourd, so he could clearly sense the changes in the water through the gourd. Otherwise, he might have injured more than one leg when he was running for his life just now. However, once he saw it clearly, he was shocked. He had seen people burrow into the ground, but he had never seen someone burrow into a rock. He thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him, but reality was reality. The net that he had cast did not catch the other party at all. The fishing net that had retracted after a single strike quickly exploded into thousands of strands again, and burrowed into the water. In the blink of an eye, it had once again enveloped Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a toothache. This thing's ejection speed was really fast. To be honest, it wouldn't take him much effort to break this net. However, It would be a pity to destroy such a miraculous treasure. Chapter 887. I have a way to persuade them to come back. Continue. I will get them back now. Feng Jiuru retreated in fear. The great bright wheel's eyes suddenly opened and said in a calm tone, "Are you joking with me?" No. I will get them back now," Feng Jiuru said and turned to fly away. The great bright wheel snorted coldly and revealed its palms that were hidden in its sleeves. 10 light balls shot out from its 10 fingers and chased after Feng Jiuru in an instant. Feng Jiuru turned around to look, and she was instantly scared out of her wits. She cried out in alarm, "Please, for the sake of the Heartless Palace." Before she could finish her words, the 10 balls of light suddenly turned into 10 huge crescent moons, weaving a net to entangle them. Feng Jiuru knew it was too late to say anything. The great bright wheel was ready to kill her, so she quickly changed her position in the air. However, the 10 moons followed her like a shadow, and she could not get rid of them. Feng Jiuru, who was struggling to deal with them, made up her mind and summoned her flying sword to fight back. The great bright wheel's eyes flashed fiercely and it shouted, "How dare you? How dare you resist?" He swung his palm in the air, and the 10 crescent moons suddenly appeared like illusions. They cut through the void, leaving silver arcs in the air. The power of the thunderbolt made people feel as if they were looking at a bolt from the blue. At this moment, a shrill scream rang out in the air, and a cloud of blood mist exploded in the air. 10 ghost-like crescent moons darted out of the blood mist and turned into 10 light balls. The great bright wheel waved his long sleeve and collected the light balls. He didn't stop at all. Leaving behind a cold snort, he turned into a golden light and disappeared into the distance. This scene caused everyone to go silent like cicadas in the winter, especially the expressions of the elders of the various sects that held down the fort here. They'd never imagined that the damning wheel would actually be so formidable, and it would kill Feng Jiuru in a fit of rage in an instant. In comparison, killing the elders was not a problem. The terror of the great bright wheel suddenly pressed down on everyone's hearts like a mountain. Even Wei Chuanxiu was slightly absent-minded. He was immersed in the demonic transformations of the 10 full moons. Putting himself in Wei Chuanxiu's shoes, he realized that it was actually difficult for him to resolve it with his own movement techniques. Only now did he understand that De Ming Luan had shown mercy when it attacked him. Otherwise, he would have been in deep trouble. Before the pieces of flesh and blood in the air could fall to the ground, Yu Qianqiu immediately dashed over. He caught one of the storage bracelets with his sharp eyes and sharp hands. After inspecting it with his divine sense, he nearly laughed out loud. Huang Xiaolong noticed that Feng Jiuru was indeed worthy of being an elder of the number 1 force in the immortal world. Just the divine grade spirit stones alone numbered more than 7 billion. Huang Xiaolong wondered if these were the public funds of the Heartless Palace. However, this was not something that Yu Qianqiu was worried about. He only thought of it as his spoils of war. He looked around in satisfaction. Then without another word, he quickly flew towards the World Commerce Association. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up when he came back to his senses. Seeing Yu Qianqiu running away so quickly after winning the battle, he thought he must have made a fortune. He immediately chased after him. The two of them landed in front of the World Commerce Association's building. When the lords saw that Yu Qianqiu had returned, they were all extremely excited. Since the torture master had returned unscathed, they reckoned that they had definitely won. "What's in Feng Jiuru's storage bracelets?" Wei Chuanqiu eagerly followed behind Yu Qianqiu, tugging on his sleeve as he asked. Yu Qianqiu flung his sleeve and strode inside, saying, "I told you it's nothing. I've told you many times." "That can't be. Feng Jiuru is in charge of the Heartless Palace's branch here. No matter how few things he has, it can't be that little." Wei Chuanqiu expressed his doubt as he chased after Huang Xiaolong. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him. He quickly walked into the main hall and stepped onto the curved platform at the edge of the pool. He turned around and shouted to the crowd, "The trouble has been resolved for now. Keep your spirits up. I believe there will be guests coming soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the feudal lords cheered excitedly. They weren't stupid. They knew that after this matter, they had at least gained a foothold in the immortal world. On the large ice layer of the life and death mound, the spectators left one after another. Soon after, more people came after hearing the news. This barren land that had always been uninhabited suddenly became lively. After a whole month, the huge ice layer finally disappeared from everyone's sight. During this time, countless people from the immortal world had come to visit. Although the opening of the World Commerce Company caused quite a few twists and turns, it became even more lively because of this. Yu Qianqiu put on his big red robe again and welcomed guests with a smiling face in the main hall. This time, the people who came from various sects were much more polite to him. When they saw him walking over, they greeted him with some reverence. This was the embodiment of strength. Only with strength could he gain everyone's recognition. This was something that needed no doubt. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu became unfathomable in everyone's eyes. No one could see through his cultivation, but based on the fact that he could easily kill 2 late-stage immortal sect masters, everyone guessed that his cultivation had at least reached the great immortal level. However, everyone was clear that this time, the World Commerce Company had formed a great enmity with the Heartless Palace. They were afraid that they wouldn't have an easy time in the future. However, the various sects that came to support the opening were still shocked by the large variety of immortal herbs that the World Commerce Company was selling. Hence, people kept making roundabout inquiries to the various feudal lords, who had big red flowers hanging on their chests in front of the counters, to find out the origin of these immortal herbs. The feudal lords who had long since unified their statements all pushed the origin of the immortal herbs to Wei Chuanxiu, saying that Wei Chuanxiu was the one who provided them. As the various sects' disciples passed on the news, they immediately sent people with money to purchase the immortal herbs that their sects needed. The trading scene on the lower 5 floors gradually became lively. The patrolling Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. For this opening he had put in a lot of effort. All the immortal herbs he sold were below 200 million divine-grade spirit stones. He didn't take out anything that was worth more than 200 million divine-grade spirit stones. Most of the immortal herbs he sold were worth less than 100 million divine-grade spirit stones. Even so, Huang Xiaolong was still worried. He studied the immortal herbs he sold according to the illustrated handbook for a long time. As long as the handbook indicated that the immortal herbs were the main ingredient of an immortal pill, Huang Xiaolong would always sell 1 or 2 ingredients. For example, if an immortal pill required 3 main ingredients, then one of the main ingredients would definitely not be sold. If it required 4 or 5 main ingredients, then 2 of them would never be sold. Yu Qianqiu naturally had a deeper consideration for doing this. He couldn't disregard everything for the sake of money. Although the World Commerce Company's main purpose was to earn money, there were other things more important than that. Therefore, he could earn money, and he could sell large amounts of immortal herbs, but he would never allow the various sects to gather all the immortal herbs they needed. Otherwise, relying on those big sects' powerful financial strength to obtain the immortal pills they urgently needed, it would be akin to helping a tiger do evil. Of course, Yu Qianqiu didn't rule out that those big sects had the immortal herbs they needed to refine immortal pills, but it was certain that they could only make up a small portion at most. It was impossible for them to make up for all the immortal herbs he sold, unless the various sects also had a utopia in their hands. Therefore, Yu Qianqiu wasn't worried that the various sects could stir up too much trouble. He still had to continue earning the money he had to earn. After walking up and down a few times, seeing that the World Commerce Company's business was on the right track, Yu Qianqiu smiled and prepared to return to the 6th floor, because there were still guests there. Master Ye, Huo Lianqing, and Du Kairan had all left, but Shui Mingqing and a few friends were still here as guests. As the host, he had to accompany them. Just as he was about to step onto the stairs to the 2nd floor, he suddenly heard a woman shout from behind him, "Sect leader Yu." Yu Qianqiu was startled. He felt that the voice was very unfamiliar, as though he had never heard it before. He turned around and saw a man and a woman who looked relatively young walking over. Their looks weren't bad, and they looked like a perfect match. Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked suspiciously, "You two are?" The woman smiled and cupped her hands. "I'm Long Xiaojiu, and Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Long Yugong is my grandfather." The man also cupped his hands and said, "I'm ancestor Guang Nian, and Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Guang Juanru is my grandfather." "Oh, excuse me. So it's the Hidden Dragon Villa's elder's grandson and granddaughter." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands politely, as though he had heard of their great names for a long time. But he was muttering in his heart. He had heard of Hidden Dragon Villa, but he had never heard of these two old fellows. He didn't know if these two little fellows were real or not. Liars often appeared in this kind of lively occasion. Thus, he was somewhat on guard in his heart, but he still wore a smile on his face as he asked, "May I know why the two Hidden Dragon Villa's great disciples have come to find me?" Long Xiaojiu smiled and took out a gift box, saying, "The two of us have come under orders to represent Hidden Dragon Villa, to congratulate the World Commerce Association on its auspicious opening and prosperous business." Guang Nianzu glanced at her. Orders were fake. It was true that she had pestered Long Yugong for half a day to agree, but he was sent to supervise her, afraid that she would see people she shouldn't see and cause trouble that she shouldn't. With a gift to receive, Yu Qianqiu was naturally happy, but he also felt that it was a little strange. He had never interacted with Hidden Dragon Villa before, so why would they come to give him a gift? Could it be that they had sharp eyes and saw that the World Commerce Association had a bright future, so they took the initiative to make friends? "Then I'll thank your villa for their good intentions." Yu Qianqiu accepted the gift, thinking that it wasn't a bad thing to have more powerful friends, so he raised his hand and said, "It's too noisy here. Two esteemed guests, please follow me to a small table on the 6th floor." Long Xiaojiu and Guang Nianzu didn't act pretentious, and followed him directly to the 6th floor. There was a person guarding the stairway to the 6th floor, obviously not allowing unauthorized people to trespass. When the guard saw that it was Yu Qianqiu who had brought people over, he naturally let them go up. Once the three of them went up to the 6th floor, they were immediately isolated from the noise downstairs. With one look, it was obvious that someone had set up a soundproof barrier. Yu Qianqiu brought the two of them through a corridor and pushed open a large door. Their eyes suddenly brightened up, and it turned out to be a large room. This was actually the living room on the 6th floor. The walls and floor were all inlaid with white jade slabs, and in addition to a few large transparent crystal floor-to-ceiling windows, the lighting was very good, making the entire living room seem spacious and bright. Chapter 888. A few rattan chairs were placed elegantly in the living room. Du Feng and the rest were either sitting or lying down as they chatted. Beside the transparent crystal window, there were two pots of devil's ivy. Wan Ling was standing there, curiously pulling the two ropes on the shutter to study it. One side of the shutter was constantly rolled up and down by her. Mu Tianjiao leaned back on a rattan chair and touched the armrest with both hands. She chuckled and said, "The simple furnishings in this living room reveal a unique elegance of craftsmanship. It's really rare. I wonder which refined scholar decorated it." Unique in unique elegance? Hua Yunlong propped up his upper body from the slightly elastic rattan chair and looked around. He chuckled and said, "A few worthless rattan chairs in an empty living room is considered elegant? Forgive my poor eyesight, but I really can't tell. But this is the first time I find this rattan chair to be quite comfortable. It's not that hard, and it's also breathable." Du Feng rolled his eyes and shook his head. "Didn't you notice that I feel much more relaxed after entering this place?" Hua Yunlong looked at himself and realized that he was lying down. He immediately sat up and smiled awkwardly. "It seems so. This is called artistic conception. It can make guests feel at home. You won't understand even if I explain it." Du Feng waved his hand in disdain. Mu Tianjiao couldn't help but smile. Hua Yunlong glared at her and wanted to argue, but he noticed that Yu Qianqiu had brought two people over. Yu Qianqiu walked to the center and pointed at the two people he brought. He said, "Let me introduce them. They are friends from Hidden Dragon Manor. Do you know them? Long Xiaojiu, Guang Nianzu, The two people cupped their hands and introduced themselves. Wan Ling, who was standing by the window, walked over and smiled. I didn't expect Miss Long to be here. Guang Nianzu's expression changed when he saw Wan Ling. He looked at Long Xiaojie worriedly. However, Long Xiaojie's expression only changed slightly. Then she smiled and said, Miss Wan, we meet again. Shui Mingqing and Mu Tianjiao smiled and nodded to greet the two newcomers. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong, on the other hand, looked at each other. Both of them had heard of the story of Wan Ling and Long Xiaojie. These two were enemies. How did they meet here? Hee. It's good that you know each other. Everyone sit down. Yu Qianqiu smiled and invited everyone to take a seat. After he sat down, he looked around and asked Mu Tianjiao curiously, Where are the two people protecting you? He was asking about the two golden-robed men who were protecting her. I don't need anyone's protection here. I've invited them to stay at the Chamber of Commerce Alliance for the time being. Mu Tian smiled. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, Miss Mu is no longer the same as before. It was very comfortable. The layout of the women's bathroom, that Wan Ling and Long Xiaojie were in, was similar to the men's bathroom, but the space was much smaller. Beside the pool, there were 4 strong men stone sculptures holding bottles and pouring water, but at least they had a pair of underwear. What made the two women speechless was that they didn't know which wicked person made these stone sculptures. The 4 men's heads were carved with cloth strips that covered their eyes. They were quite considerate of the women. But even so, the 2 women felt a little uncomfortable and blushed slightly. Although they were stone sculptures, if they really took off their clothes and soaked in the pool, they would still feel like they were being watched by men. Miss Long, why is your face red? Are you shy? Wan Ling suddenly looked at Long Xiaojie and smiled. Long Xiaojie looked back and sneered. Why don't you look at your face in the mirror? Wan Ling was stunned. Then, she felt that her face was also a little hot. She was speechless. Long Xiaojie was also stunned. She realized that this was the first time she made this woman speechless. She felt an inexplicable sense of pleasure in her heart. At the same time, she felt a little strange. This woman was famous for being a slut. Who knew how many men she had hooked up with? How could she be shy? The environment here is really special. It's really unique. As Wan Ling spoke, she began to undress herself. After a while, she was only left with a pair of underwear and a doo-doo. Her slender thighs were straight, her exposed skin was smooth and white, and her graceful figure was curvy. Even a woman would be tempted to look at her. Wan Ling deliberately walked to Long Xiaojie and stood beside her. She tilted her head to look at Long Xiaojie, who was slightly shorter than her. It was obvious that she wanted to show off her figure. Then, she swayed her waist and walked into the pool. After soaking in the water, she splashed water with her palm and wiped her fragrant shoulders. She said to herself, There was once someone who kept saying that my figure was the best in the world. Unfortunately, that person was killed by a jealous woman. When she said that, Long Xiaojie was so angry that she almost bit her lips. The past flashed before her eyes. In the end, she suppressed her anger and slowly undressed her clothes. She also wore underwear and doo-doo, and went into the water. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not. When she walked to Wan Ling, she reached behind her and gently pulled down the doo-doo. Her 2 breasts popped out. The smile on Wan Ling's face froze. Her mouth was slightly open as she subconsciously looked at her chest. Chapter 889. Some men are easily bewitched by some women. This kind of man is blind and can't even tell good from bad. He deserves to die. Long Xiaojie held the clear spring water with both hands and poured it on her proud breasts. She said disapprovingly, I've met such a man before. He came back to his senses and scolded himself for being blind. He said that some women can't attract a man's attention even if they strip naked. Sigh. I don't know if what he said is true or false. But what's the use of keeping such a man who goes with the wind? Wan Ling was dumbfounded by Long Xiaojie's words. Although Long Xiaojie's words were nonsensical, they hit Wan Ling's weak spot, reminding her of the scholar she met many years ago. At that time, she did strip naked. Who knew that the scholar would just take liberties with her? and then leave without any reluctance. It seemed that her body was really not attractive to men. "Hey, Miss Wan, what's wrong?" Long Xiaojie said with concern, but a carefree smile appeared on her face. She had never won a verbal argument with her before. She didn't expect that she would be defeated by her today. Wan Ling came back to her senses. She couldn't help but stare at the other party's chest. She forced a smile and said, "Nothing, I suddenly thought of something." Long Xiaojie said, "Oh," and suddenly asked curiously, "Why are you bathing in a doo-doo? Are you shy to see us naked?" "Hee, this water monster is cold." Wan Ling smiled absent-mindedly. "Miss Wan, you're wrong. It's uncomfortable to wear clothes in the water." Long Xiaojie turned behind Wan Ling and said, "Come, I'll help you take it off." "It's okay. It's fine like this." Wan Ling hugged her chest and turned to avoid. However, the more she avoided, the more Long Xiaojie wanted to see her look after being exposed. It seemed that she couldn't wait to take off her doo-doo. Ignoring the other party's repeated rejection, she stuck close to her and said kindly, "It's okay. It's nothing. I'll help you." As a result, Wan Ling was forced to the edge of the pool and had nowhere to retreat. Long Xiaojie's hand touched her again. She immediately shouted in embarrassment and anger, "Get lost! Get lost!" She had never been so unconfident before, but because of Long Xiaojie's nonsensical words, she immediately became powerless to fight back. In front of Long Xiaojie, she was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Wan Ling came out of the water in a fluster and embarrassment. She quickly dried herself, took out her clothes, and put them on hastily. As she walked, she tidied up her clothes and left in a hurry. Long Xiaojie was stunned in the pool. Then a smile appeared on her face. The more she smiled, the more complacent she became. She laughed unrestrainedly until she was almost out of breath. Hugging her jiggling breasts, she laughed so hard that she bent forward and backward. On the other side, the 5 men who were chatting and taking a bath were suddenly startled by Wan Ling's scream. They looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. No matter how he heard it, it sounded like the cry of a pervert. Could it be that some shameless person came here to peep? "Everyone, I'm sorry. I'll make a move first." Guang Nianzu cupped his hands at them and quickly put on his clothes. Just as he reached the underground passage, he saw Wan Ling running out with tears in her eyes. He couldn't help but be stunned. The demoness Wan Ling was actually crying? Guang Nianzu rushed to the end of the passage in a hurry and stopped in front of the door. After all, this was a place for women to bathe. It wasn't good to barge in. At this moment, Long Xiaojie's complacent and carefree laughter came from inside. Guang Nianzu hadn't heard her laugh like this for a long time. Things seemed a little strange. He stood outside and shouted anxiously, "Little Jiu Air, what's wrong?" "Nothing, I'm fine. Why did you come here? This is a place for women to bathe. What are you doing here? Don't come in." Long Xiaojie's voice came from inside. Guang Nianzu was stunned. He stood outside and said awkwardly, "Little Jiu Air, don't misunderstand. I just saw Wan Ling crying and ran out. I thought something happened here, so..." "She cried?" Long Xiaojie's tone was very surprised. Then she giggled until she was out of breath. "Alright, don't stand outside anymore. Otherwise I'll feel uncomfortable all over. Let me soak in some more. The World Chamber of Commerce's mountain spring is indeed very comfortable. Then call me if you need anything. I won't go too far." After Guang Nianzu shouted, he listened for a while. Seeing that the person inside ignored him, he could only sigh and turn to leave. When he reached the end of the passage, he looked at the male bathroom in front of him. He felt that it wasn't appropriate to go back now. He simply stood against the wall and waited quietly. At this moment, Long Xiaojie was happily soaking in the water. After leisurely and contented in the pool for a while, she suddenly took off her underwear and wandered around in the water naked. She constantly scrutinized her body and found that the places that should be protruding were protruding, the places that should be perky were protruding, and the places that should be thin were thin. This was the first time she was so satisfied with her body. She caressed her curves with an infatuated expression. In the male bathroom, Yu Qianqiu jumped out of the pool while cursing. He took out his clothes and prepared to wear them. Shui Mingqing also jumped out of the pool. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong looked at each other. Du Feng asked curiously, "Why are the two of you in such a hurry?" Hui Yunlong, who was at the side, immediately got angry and shouted, "Brother Yu, why don't you talk to my mythical fire palace? You can totally buy immortal weapons from my mythical fire palace and sell them at the World Chamber of Commerce to earn the price difference. Don't worry, it's only a matter of time. Currently, my World Chamber of Commerce's financial resources are limited. We'll do it one by one." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and suddenly frowned. He looked at Du Feng and Hui Yunlong and asked curiously, "Haven't you two been chasing Mu Tianjiao for a long time? With your status in the immortal world, you should have caught up long ago. Why did the great commander of the immortal palace Wu Xiong interfere?" As soon as he said this, the two's faces were filled with bitterness. Shui Mingqing was a little curious. He didn't expect these two fellows to have chased Mu Tianjiao. Du Feng shook his head slowly and said, "Brother Yu, don't mention it anymore. Now that she's taken, there's no point in talking about it anymore. Otherwise, it'll cause unnecessary trouble." Hui Yunlong, who was at the side, suddenly dived into the water. He held his head in the water for a while before popping his head out. He shook his head so hard that water splashed everywhere. He laughed loudly and said, "If you want to blame something, blame it on our two families not being strong enough. It's normal that she doesn't like us. The entire immortal world respects the immortal palace. To be able to find someone from the immortal palace as a backer, others can't even beg for it. What else can we say? After all, we're friends. We can only wish her well." Yu Qianqiu could hear a bit of helplessness and strong jealousy in their words. The meaning was very obvious. It was nothing more than saying that Mu Tianjiao had taken a fancy to the power of the immortal palace and had rejected them. But Yu Qianqiu frowned when he thought about it. He felt that Mu Tianjiao shouldn't be that kind of person. Mu Tianjiao was a proud and strong-willed woman. She didn't seem like the kind of woman who would be shameless for glory and wealth. This was what made her attractive. Otherwise, Du Feng and Hui Yunlong wouldn't have taken a fancy to her, and she wouldn't have come all the way to the World Chamber of Commerce to bow down and congratulate them. Chapter 890. With her current status as Wu Xiong's woman, she didn't need to care about a small world commerce chamber. Now that she was here, Yu Qianqiu had a better impression of himself. He sneered at himself for being afraid of retaliation for rejecting the other party's love. Yu Qianqiu felt that there must be some unknown inside story, and wondered if he should ask Mu Tianjiao if there was a chance. In reality, they were overcomplicating the problem. Mu Tianjiao just couldn't handle the pressure from Immortal Palace. Du Feng and Hui Yunlong were a little depressed because they brought up the topic of Mu Tianjiao. Since Mu Tianjiao had already become Wu Xiong's woman, Yu Qianqiu couldn't say anything else. The atmosphere immediately became a little depressing. After they casually soaked in the hot spring, they got up. After putting on their clothes, they walked out and saw Long Xiaojiu coming out as well. When they met, the men noticed that Long Xiaojiu was full of energy and radiant after her bath. They were all surprised by the miraculous effects of the spring bath. They couldn't help but look at each other and realized that the men hadn't changed much. "Is Wan Ling still soaking in there?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the other end of the tunnel and asked. Long Xiaojiu chuckled and said, "She encountered something unhappy, so she left first." The men looked at each other and guessed that the two women might be fighting again. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything and led them out of the underground. After coming out, Shui Mingqing remembered what Yu Qianqiu had told him and bade farewell to everyone. Everyone thought that Wan Ling had left, but when they returned to the 6th floor, they found Wan Ling and Mu Tianjiao sitting opposite each other and chatting happily. When the two women saw them return, they stood up to greet them. Long Xiaojiu couldn't help but frown when she saw that Wan Ling seemed to be fine. The sky was already close to dusk, and the guests were about to leave when Yu Qianqiu smiled and urged them to stay. "My 6th floor has always been used to entertain guests, and I haven't used it even once. Everyone, please do me the honor. In the evening, I would like to invite all of you to the rooftop to watch the stars and admire the moon, and to taste my World Chamber of Commerce's barbecue and wine." Looking at the sky outside, Wan Ling hesitated before she said, "It's fine with us, but Sister Tianjiao's identity is a little sensitive. I'm afraid it won't be convenient for her to spend the night with a bunch of men." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "What does that have to do with anything? Aren't you and Miss Long a woman?" Glancing at Long Xiaojiu, Wan Ling smiled. "Miss Long and I don't have a good reputation in this field. I'm afraid that we might implicate Sister Tianjiao." She was really self-aware, but Long Xiaojiu was angered by her. It was all thanks to her that she was able to achieve her current reputation. They all knew the meaning of her words. Mu Tianjiao's current identity was indeed very sensitive. A little bit of gossip could cause trouble. If Suyi didn't return it, and mixed with two women who were fighting over a man, who knew what kind of rumors would spread. Gossip was a fearful thing. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. In his mind, this was making a mountain out of a molehill. But if he was serious here, there were indeed many things to pay attention to. Seeing that he was having a headache, Du Feng smiled and said, "Brother you don't have to worry too much. With so many people in the World Chamber of Commerce, it's not like you can't find a woman. Just hire one to accompany the guests. With a woman by your side, you can more or less avoid suspicion." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. There were also several women in the World Chamber of Commerce. After thinking about it, he still felt that it was most suitable for Lu Yanqing to accompany a guest like Mu Tianjiao. There was no need to do anything, just be a vase. In any case, it was just a decoration. This was because he found that other than treating people, Lu Yanqing basically couldn't do anything. Furthermore, her ability to handle things was extremely poor. He really didn't know how she had survived for so many years. Just like now, when she was given some work to do, she always had to get Wen Lanfeng's help in order to do it well. Just a small matter would require two people. At this moment, someone came down to report that two of Mu Tianjiao's guards had come to pick her up. Yu Qianqiu looked at Mu Tianjiao's intentions, then instructed his subordinate, "Invite them up, and also call Lu Yanqing over." That person agreed and left. Not long later, the two golden-robed men arrived. Mu Tianjiao cupped her hands and bowed. "I won't be leaving today. I'll stay at the World Chamber of Commerce for the night, and leave tomorrow. I'll have to trouble the two of you to stay here for the night." The two golden-robed men cupped their hands in agreement. They had no objections. They were originally sent by Wu Xiong to protect Mu Tianjiao, or listen to her orders, so they had no right to control Mu Tianjiao's freedom. Mu Tianjiao then said to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, "I'll have to trouble sect leader Yu to arrange 2 rooms for them." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Since they were sent by the commander to protect you, then arrange for them to be on the left and right side of your room. What do you think?" Mu Tianjiao knew that he was using this to get Wu Xiong's people to avoid arousing suspicion, so she agreed. The two maintained a certain level of respect in their words and actions. In reality, Yu Qianqiu hated doing this kind of thing the most, because he knew that the two of them couldn't be pure friends. He was a man, and the other was Wu Xiong's woman. Even if the other party condescended to treat him, he still had to keep his distance. They didn't expect the World Chamber of Commerce to have such a beautiful woman. "Help me greet the guests." Yu Qianqiu instructed Lu Yanqing, then cupped his hands towards the crowd and said, "Everyone, please take a seat. I have something to do. I'll be right back." The few of them were a little absent-minded when they saw Lu Yanqing, and didn't notice that Yu Qianqiu had left. After Yu Qianqiu left, he went straight to the top floor. He didn't see Wei Chuanqiu at first, but later on, he felt that it was a little strange. This guy always liked to follow behind him, but now that half a day had passed, he still hadn't seen him. He had noticed it when he came up from below, but he didn't see Wei Chuanqiu. Now, he suspected that Wei Chuanqiu was with Yin Peng. As he expected, when he reached the top floor, Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng were standing side by side at the edge of the railing. Yu Qianqiu was suspicious in his heart. Why was this old fellow so patient today to accompany Yin Peng on guard? As soon as he appeared, Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng also turned to look. Without waiting for the smiling Yu Qianqiu to speak, Wei Chuanqiu was already waving at him. "Yu Qianqiu, I was just looking for you. Yu Qianqiu was startled and found that both of their faces were a little serious. After approaching the two of them, he asked suspiciously, "Looking for me? What's the matter?" Wei Chuanqiu was silent for a moment, then said solemnly, "After coming back, I have been discussing this matter with Yin Peng. Because this matter is of great importance, Yin Peng also thought that he should find you to clarify this matter. Although I don't know if you will answer honestly, I still have to ask you." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed, and he vaguely guessed what was going on. Before, he didn't pay attention, but after doing that, he regretted it a little. But after thinking about it, there was nothing to regret. Hiding everything was not a solution. After all, he couldn't just take a beating and not fight back. "What's the matter? You make it sound like it's something serious," Yu Qianqiu said with a puzzled expression. "Do you still remember the myriad swords burst that you used in the battle earlier?" Wei Chuanqiu said word by word. "Right now, there are people who suspect that you are related to the myriad swords demon lord. You should also know that the immortal world and the netherworld cannot tolerate the remnants of the myriad swords demon lord." "Suspect that I am related to the myriad swords demon lord?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at his own nose, as if he heard the world's funniest joke, and said, "I actually hope that I can be related to the myriad swords demon lord, but it is a pity that it is impossible. The myriad swords demon lord has been dead for so many years. Who is so bored to actually connect me with the myriad swords demon lord?" The Chamber of Commerce Alliance's Great Bright Wheel Controller. Wei Chuanqiu's green brows knitted together, and her expression was abnormally serious. "In reality, you need to go and explain to him. We are only asking you to have an idea in our hearts, so that we can prepare early. We have no ill intentions towards you." Saying that, she waved her hand and pointed around. "Do you believe that the Chamber of Commerce Alliance has already arranged people around here? If it wasn't for the two of us, the Great Bright Wheel Controller would have already taken action. In short, if you don't give him a satisfactory answer, it is impossible for you to leave the hallucination immortal city." You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.